My name is Emily Carter, and I am 30 years old. If you had asked me a few years ago what my life looked like, I would have smiled and told you I was the happiest woman in Columbus, Ohio. I married for love, not for money, not for convenience, but for the kind of love that makes you believe you've found your forever. My husband, Daniel Carter, was once my best friend, my confidant, and the man I trusted with every part of my heart. Together, we built dreams, whispered plans late into the night, and promised to protect each other no matter what. We lived in his family home, a modest house on the outskirts of Columbus. Daniel's parents, Evelyn and Henry, shared the same roof with us, along with his younger sister, Melissa. It wasn't unusual for families in our community to live together, but what started as a practical arrangement slowly turned into something else, a constant reminder that I was never truly in control of my own household. At the time, though, I didn't let it bother me. My focus was on my little girl, Ava, who had just turned 5. She was my entire world. With her dark curls and curious eyes, she carried an innocence that I wanted to protect at all costs. Every morning when she wrapped her tiny arms around my neck and whispered, "I love you, Mommy," it felt like all the struggles in the world faded away. My in-laws presented two very different faces. Henry, Daniel's father, was a kind and gentle man. He respected me and often reminded me to ignore the little comments Evelyn made. He had a small business, a shop that barely covered household expenses, and he worked tirelessly to keep it afloat. Evelyn, however, was controlling, sharp-tongued, and forever dissatisfied. She believed Daniel deserved a wife who would bend at her command, and though I tried my best to be respectful, I could never meet her impossible standards. And then there was Melissa. Unmarried and in her mid-20s, she was bitter about her life. She compared herself constantly to me, always whispering in her mother's ear and criticizing me behind closed doors. Whenever Daniel and I argued, it was never long before Melissa appeared, adding fuel to the fire. On the other side of my life were my parents, Stephen and Helen Dawson. They were loving, supportive, and wealthy in a way that Daniel's family could only dream of. As their only daughter, I had always been cherished, and I knew I could rely on them. Still, I hated asking them for help. I wanted my marriage to stand on its own, without depending on my parents' money. But I would soon learn that to my in-laws, my parents' wealth was not just a fact, it was an opportunity. At first, I believed I could balance it all, a loving husband, difficult in-laws, and a sweet daughter who deserved the best of everything. I didn't know then that the very people who should have been my family would become the ones to break me. In the early months of my marriage, life seemed almost perfect. Daniel was attentive and gentle, always quick to hold my hand or laugh at my jokes. We would spend evenings talking about our future, about Ava's schooling, about maybe one day owning a small home of our own, separate from his parents. I clung to those moments, convincing myself that even with Evelyn's sharp comments and Melissa's constant presence, our love was enough to hold us steady. But things began to change in subtle ways. It started with Evelyn pulling me aside one afternoon while Daniel was at work. She sighed dramatically and told me their small shop had suffered a major loss. "Henry is doing all he can," she said, "but business is hard these days. If only you could ask your parents to help a little. It's not much to them, but it could mean survival for us." I froze. Asking my parents for money had never been part of my marriage. Still, Evelyn pressed on, reminding me that family should sacrifice for family. When Daniel came home that evening, he repeated her words. "Just this once," he said. "It's only $2,000. Your parents won't even notice it's gone." I hated myself for agreeing, but I did. I called my father and, with a trembling voice, asked for the money. Of course, he didn't question me. Within a week, the $2,000 had been handed over, and Evelyn acted as if she had done me a favor by accepting it. I thought it would end there, but I was wrong. A few months later, Melissa complained endlessly about how she couldn't finish a professional course she wanted because of money. "All the girls I know are moving forward and I'm stuck here," she wailed to Daniel. Evelyn chimed in, telling Daniel that if I really cared about his family, I would ask my parents again. This time the demand was $3,500. Once more, Daniel persuaded me, saying it was only temporary, just until Melissa could stand on her own 2 feet. I gave in, even though it made me feel like a child asking my parents for favors instead of an adult running her own household. By the third time, I had started to see the pattern. Evelyn claimed the roof needed urgent repairs, and Henry, too weary to fight with his wife, remained silent. Daniel came to me once more, asking for $5,000. I remember standing in the kitchen, gripping the counter, wondering how I had allowed this cycle to begin. But Daniel's pleading eyes and his insistence that it's just for the family broke me down. So once again, I asked. Once again, my parents gave. And once again, I felt a piece of my dignity crumble. In total, I had given $10,500 of my parents' money to my in-laws. I told myself I was protecting my marriage, protecting Ava's future. But in my heart, I began to feel something shift. Each request left a shadow behind, and each dollar made Daniel a little less mine and a little more theirs. The demands didn't stop. In fact, the more I gave, the bolder Evelyn and Melissa became. What had once been presented as emergencies soon turned into expectations, almost as if my parents' money was their entitlement. Melissa, especially, grew restless. She was nearing her late 20s, still unmarried, and she had made it no secret that she wanted a wedding that would impress everyone she knew. She complained about how her friends were settling down with lavish ceremonies while she was stuck because her family couldn't afford one. I overheard Evelyn whispering to her one evening in the kitchen. "Don't worry," she said. "Emily's parents have more than enough. They'll cover it. They have to." My heart sank. They weren't asking anymore. They were planning. A week later, during dinner, Evelyn raised the subject openly. "Melissa deserves a proper wedding," she announced. "It's our duty as a family to make it happen. But we can't do it alone. Emily, you'll have to speak to your parents. We'll need at least $25,000 to cover the costs." I nearly dropped my fork. $25,000? Asked, my voice trembling. "Yes," Melissa cut in, her tone sharp. "It's nothing to them, right? Your parents are wealthy. They won't even miss it." Daniel, who had once been my shield, leaned back in his chair and said nothing. I looked at him, desperate for support, but when Evelyn placed her hand on his arm, he finally spoke. "She's right, Emily," he said quietly at first. "What's the harm? They've helped before, and they can help again. This time it's for my sister's future. Surely your parents would want that." I felt my face burn. "No," I said firmly. "They've already given so much. $10,000 is not small change, and I will not ask them again." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, and Melissa scoffed. "So, you're willing to ruin my future because of your pride?" Melissa snapped. "It's not about pride," I shot back. "It's about boundaries. My parents are not a bank. I will not beg them again." The table went silent, the air thick with tension. I could feel Evelyn's glare burning into me, and Melissa's bitterness was practically spilling out of her. But what hurt the most was Daniel's face. Cold, disappointed, as if I had betrayed him instead of protecting the family we had built. From that night forward, the atmosphere in the house grew toxic. Evelyn and Melissa whispered behind my back louder than ever. Daniel grew distant, siding with them in arguments instead of me. I felt like a stranger in my own home, walking on eggshells, waiting for the day when their resentment would erupt into something far worse than words. And deep down, I knew that day was coming. The storm arrived on an ordinary evening. Dinner was on the table, Ava was coloring at the side, and I was silently praying that the conversation wouldn't turn ugly. But Evelyn and Melissa had other plans. They began casually, talking about a wedding venue Melissa liked, about the flowers she wanted, the dress she deserved. Then, almost on cue, Evelyn turned to me. "Emily, have you spoken to your parents yet?" she asked, her tone sharp beneath the fake sweetness. I set down my fork. "I already told you. I will not ask them for money again." Melissa slammed her hand on the table. "You're unbelievable. You'd rather watch me stay single forever than help your own family. $25,000 is nothing to them." They won't even notice. My chest tightened. I am not their messenger, Melissa. And I am not going to keep draining them, because you want a wedding like your friends. Enough is enough. The room froze for a moment. Then Evelyn's voice sliced through the silence. Daniel, are you really going to let her speak to us this way? Are you going to let your wife ruin your sister's future? Daniel's eyes met mine. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw doubt, hesitation, maybe even love. But then his jaw tightened. He pushed back his chair and stood. You don't get it, Emily, he said, his voice trembling with anger. It wouldn't cost them anything. Why do you always have to fight? Why can't you just do this one thing for us? My throat burned. Because it's not one thing, Daniel. It's been 3 times already. Over $10,000. When does it stop? When do we stop leeching off my parents? The words came out louder than I intended. Ava looked up from her coloring, frightened by the shouting. That's when Daniel snapped. He yanked off his heavy work boot with a thick sole. Before I could move, he swung it hard against the side of my head. Pain exploded, sharp and blinding, and I stumbled back, clutching my scalp. Mommy, Ava screamed, rushing toward me. But Daniel turned on her too. Stay out of this, he barked, and then, with the same boot, struck his own daughter across the head. Ava collapsed to the floor, sobbing in terror. I screamed, crawling toward her, shielding her with my arms. My head throbbed, blood trickling where the boot had hit. Stop, Daniel. Please. Henry leapt from his chair, trying to grab his son's arm. Enough. Have you lost your mind? He shouted. But Evelyn and Melissa pulled him back, yelling at him to stay out of it. Then, in a blur of chaos, the 3 of them, Daniel, Evelyn, and Melissa, shoved me and Ava toward the front door. My knees scraped against the floor as I tried to hold on to my little girl. The cold night air hit us as the door flew open, and with one final shove, they threw us out onto the porch. The door slammed behind us. I held Ava close, her tiny body shaking against mine. My vision blurred from pain and tears, but one thought cut through the fog. This was the moment everything changed. The night air was cold against my skin, but I barely felt it. All I could think about was Ava, her little arms wrapped tightly around my neck, her sobs echoing in my ears. My head throbbed from the blow of Daniel's boot, and I could still feel the sting of humiliation from being dragged and thrown out of what was supposed to be my home. I staggered down the porch steps, clutching Ava, and somehow managed to get to the sidewalk. My hands shook as I reached into my pocket for my phone. With trembling fingers, I called the only people I could trust, my parents. Mom, I sobbed when Helen answered. Please, we need you. Within half an hour, Stephen and Helen Dawson pulled up in their car. My mother gasped when she saw us. Oh my God, Emily, she cried, rushing to take Ava into her arms. My father steadied me, his face pale with shock and rage. Who did this? He demanded, his voice trembling. Daniel, I whispered. And Evelyn, Melissa. They all. My words broke into tears. Stephen didn't wait for more. Get in the car, he said firmly. We're going home. Back at my parents' house, the warmth of their living room felt like another world. My mother gently cleaned the cut on my scalp while Ava curled up against her grandmother, still sniffling softly. My father paced the room, his hands clenched into fists. This has gone too far. They've crossed every line, he muttered. For the first time in days, I felt safe. But the shame lingered. I hated that I had allowed it to come to this, that I had bent so many times under Evelyn's manipulations, that I had let Daniel become a stranger to me. Later that night, as I lay in the guest room bed with Ava tucked beside me, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Henry Carter. I'm so sorry, it read. I tried to stop them. Please believe me. You and Ava didn't deserve this. If you need me to speak in court, I will. I can't defend what my wife and children have done. Tears filled my eyes again, but this time they weren't just from pain. There was relief, too. I wasn't completely alone. Henry's message reminded me that even in the darkest moments, there was someone willing to stand on the side of truth. I looked at Ava's sleeping face, bruised but peaceful now, and I made a silent promise. I will never let anyone hurt her again. And I will fight back. The very next morning, my parents insisted we go straight to the hospital. Doctors examined both me and Ava, documenting every bruise and injury. The swelling on Ava's small forehead and the cut on my scalp were photographed, logged, and officially reported. Seeing my little girl in that hospital bed, clutching my hand while nurses checked her vitals, hardened something inside me. What had once been fear turned into resolve. With medical reports in hand, we went directly to the police station in Columbus. Filing the complaint was the hardest thing I'd ever done. My voice shook as I described how Daniel had lifted his heavy boot and struck both me and our 5-year-old daughter. The officer's expression darkened, and he carefully noted every detail. Evelyn and Melissa's role in provoking and assisting him was also recorded. "Don't worry, Mrs. Carter," the officer said firmly. "You and your daughter are safe now. This will not be ignored." My father immediately contacted an attorney, one of the best in the city. Court proceedings began within weeks. On the day of the hearing, I sat nervously in the courtroom, Ava's hand clasped tightly in mine. Across the aisle sat Daniel, Evelyn, and Melissa, their faces twisted with defiance. Henry was there too, but not with them. He sat behind me, quietly offering his support. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank transfers of $2,000, $3,500, and $5,000 were presented, proving the pattern of financial exploitation. My medical reports and Ava's hospital records told the story of the brutal night we had been attacked. And when Henry took the stand, his testimony sealed their fate. He spoke calmly but firmly about the years of manipulation he had witnessed, about the way Evelyn and Melissa had poisoned Daniel's mind, and about how he himself had tried to intervene when the violence broke out. When it was my turn to testify, I stood tall, even though my knees trembled. I described everything: the pressure to keep asking my parents for money, the humiliation of handing it over again and again, and the moment my husband struck me and our daughter with his boot. The courtroom was silent as my voice cracked, but I didn't stop. The judge's verdict came swift and clear. Daniel Carter was convicted of domestic violence and child abuse. Evelyn Carter and Melissa Carter were convicted of conspiracy and aiding in financial exploitation. All three were sentenced to prison time, their actions deemed not only abusive, but deeply criminal. When the judge turned to me, her tone softened. "Mrs. Carter, you are granted full custody of your daughter, Ava. The divorce petition you filed will also be finalized. From this day forward, you and your child are legally protected from these individuals." Tears blurred my vision, but this time they were tears of relief. Justice had spoken. As we left the courthouse, Ava clutched my hand and whispered, "Mommy, are we safe now?" I knelt down, kissed her forehead gently, and said, "Yes, baby, we're safe. No one will ever hurt us again." The trial had ended, but its ripples tore Daniel's family apart in ways no one could have predicted. While Daniel, Evelyn, and Melissa served their prison sentences, Henry Carter was left to pick up the pieces. Henry was a quiet man, but he had dignity, and I think something inside him broke when he saw how far his wife and children had gone. He visited my parents' house one afternoon, sitting across from me in the living room with tired eyes. "I filed for divorce," he said simply, "after what Evelyn did. Not just to you, but to her own granddaughter. I cannot stay married to her. I won't spend another day tied to that kind of cruelty." I didn't know what to say at first. Part of me grieved for him, for the family he had lost. But another part of me respected him deeply. It took courage to break free, to admit that his wife and children had become strangers to him. Henry went further. He cut Daniel and Melissa out of his small business, closing their access completely. "They will not see a single cent of it again," he told me. "Whatever mistakes I've made by staying silent all these years, I will not make them twice." From then on, Henry stood firmly on my side. He would occasionally visit me and Ava, bringing groceries, small gifts, or sometimes nothing at all, just his quiet company. Ava warmed to him quickly, her little hand always slipping into his whenever he came by. It wasn't the family I had once dreamed of, but it was something real, something honest. And for me, that meant everything. Life after the trial was not easy, but for the first time in years, it was mine. I no longer woke up to the sound of Evelyn's criticisms or Melissa's bitter complaints. I no longer lived in fear of Daniel's shifting moods. Instead, I woke up in the comfort of my parents' home, with Ava curled beside me, safe and smiling. My parents, Stephen and Helen, made it clear from the very beginning. You and Ava are our priority now. They transferred their estate and family business into my name, saying it was only right since I was their only child. At first, the weight of that responsibility felt overwhelming, but with their guidance, I learned to manage it. For once, I wasn't giving away money under pressure. I was investing it for my daughter's future. Ava slowly healed too. She started laughing again, playing with her toys without fear, and sleeping through the night without waking from nightmares. Every milestone she reached, her first day of kindergarten, her drawings taped proudly to the fridge, reminded me why I had fought so hard. Henry kept his promise. He visited often, bringing quiet reassurance. He had divorced Evelyn and cut ties with Daniel and Melissa completely. For Ava, he became the only grandparent on her father's side who mattered, and for me, he became a symbol that not everyone in that house had been lost. One evening, months later, I stood in the office of the business that was now mine, looking out the window as the lights of Columbus shimmered in the distance. Ava was at home with my parents, safe, happy, and loved. I thought about the road that had brought me here, the love I had once believed in, the betrayal that shattered it, the night a heavy boot ended my marriage, and the courtroom that gave me justice. I realized then that my story wasn't just one of pain. It was one of survival, of standing back up when life tried to crush me, of finding strength not only for myself, but for the little girl who depended on me. And as I turned off the light and walked out of that office, I carried with me a truth that no one could ever take away. We were free, we were safe, and our future was finally our own. If there's one thing my story has taught me, it's that silence only protects the people who hurt you. For too long, I convinced myself that love was enough, that sacrifice would eventually be rewarded, that patience would change the hearts of those determined to control me. I was wrong. Love without respect is not love. Sacrifice without boundaries is not noble, it's dangerous. And patience, when used as an excuse to endure cruelty, only gives power to the abuser. The night Daniel raised his boot against me and our daughter, I thought my life had ended. But in reality, that was the night it truly began. Because from that moment forward, I realized that survival isn't about how much pain you can take. It's about how loudly you can say, enough. To every woman watching this, and to every parent, sibling, or friend who has ever felt powerless, you are stronger than you think. You have the right to stand up, to speak out, to protect yourself and the ones you love. Do not let fear convince you that you are trapped. There is always a way forward, and sometimes that way forward begins the moment you decide you deserve better. Today, I am not just a divorced woman. I am not just a survivor. I am a mother who fought for her daughter's safety. I am a daughter who honored the love of her parents by refusing to be broken. And I am a woman who will never again apologize for demanding the respect that should have been mine from the start. If you take anything away from my story, let it be this. Never measure your worth by how much pain you can endure. Measure it by how fiercely you protect your dignity, your peace, and your future. Because at the end of the day, no matter how dark the night feels, the power to change your story has always been, and will always be yours. Thank you for watching this story until the end. If you enjoyed it and want to hear more powerful stories like this, make sure to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything and helps us bring more inspiring stories to you.